You are so loved here. Welcome to the Unconditional Journey podcast, where we will be exploring different ways to awaken to our life's purpose through a journey to self-love. Awakening the divine inside of us all along the way. We will explore different spiritual modalities, practices, and techniques to find deeper understanding. Some that we have tried and new ones that we want to learn. We'll be sharing our own experiences with you and having special guests on to learn new ways to heal on our journey for the mind, body, and spirit. Come along with us as we awaken the spirit and purpose inside. Welcome back to the Unconditional Journey. This is kind of a special episode, I guess. We'll see. My estranged father passed away on January 30th. And we hadn't really talked in a while. It was really hard for me to have a relationship with him. And it all started back when I was 16 and he just decided to walk out. We were really close when I was little, like besties. And it was really fun to be around him. He taught me how to hammer a nail in like 3 hits. We built stuff together. He was my basketball coach. It's gonna be hard. Don't worry, it's good. He was my first basketball coach. Played for Oregon State when he was younger. I think he still might hold records at his high school in Erie, Oregon, from the 50s. He was 6'8". He's my giant hero. Which is why it hurt so bad when he left, you know? We were at a family friend annual camp out that we went to at the lake, and I always look forward to it. It was Labor Day weekend, and my favorite thing to do there was catch crawdads with bacon off the end of one of the docks, go canoeing, and just swimming in the lake all the time. And he had just gotten a new job a few months back, and he said he was busy at work and he couldn't come on the day that we went up there. He was going to come later. And then 2 days went by and he didn't show up until Saturday. And when he showed up, everyone was like, "Where have you been?" And he was like, "This bleepity bleep left without me." And that guy said, "Screw you. I just helped you move out of your house." And that's how my mom and I found out that he was leaving. It really sucked. It broke my heart. I always saw it as like this massive bubble that just encased me with, I guess, love. If I think about it now, that's the whole point of this podcast, is love and how to get back to love. And I think that bubble burst, and that love went away, you know? I we kind of saw it coming, there was like distance and separation and like even in our own home, but it still was shocking. So, the initial phase is like shock, then anger, and then sadness and anger, a lot of anger, you know. And there was so many things that I don't remember, and I was 16 and I had to start school the next week. I mean, priceless timing. And yeah, I didn't want to see him, and he would, try to get my mom to make me go see him, and she would say like, "He's your father, you need to go see him." So I would try it, and like I remember he had an apartment and me and my niece and nephew went to stay at his apartment and I was just pissed, but I was glad that they were there because if I would have been there by myself, I would have just been so angry. And years went by. I'd try to have a relationship with him, and then when I would just like understand more and more that there were a lot of lies that had happened. Not just my dad, my mom too. Like in the 70s and 80s, I felt like people just lied to kids all the time, and they didn't think that it mattered. And as Generation X, it really mattered. And I feel like I try to be an open book to my kids now. And I mean, they might not like what they hear, but I don't want to lie to them. So anyway, went through college, and well, before that, I got pregnant and had a baby. And I decided that adoption would be the best for my son. And it was really hard, but it was kind of like that first knowing, that first understanding of like, I know this is the best opportunity for him. And I've always been really optimistic about it. And I thought, like, I'm just at like 18 going on 19. Like, luckily, make my own decisions and nobody really stopped me. My dad did try, but I I didn't think that someone who had just like given up on me a couple of years before that should have wanted, or like, no, he wanted to raise my son until I got on my feet. And in my head, I was like, you gave up on me. Why would I let you like screw up my kid? And I don't want to screw up my kid. And by choosing adoption, I felt like I was helping to protect my child from my family, which I knew more at that age than I understood. And I understand now way more about what I was thinking and what I knew and understood. And it blows my mind. And, my son grew up with a great family and he had two parents. And I felt like when my dad left, like it exploded this bubble of safety and security. And I didn't want to get married at the time. And I didn't want my son to grow up without that like family security. And that bubble that I had just lost. Like I didn't think that he would get that. And I wanted them to experience that, like full loving family. And, knowing that I did that out of love. Now I understand a lot of other details that just reassure me that that was the best choice. And I was able to grow and change and heal and show up better. But along the years, I just kept going to therapy, trying to deal with all this stuff. And I had anger at my dad, and anger at my mom. But I felt like I had to stay and help my mom because he just left. But I just couldn't do that. Like that wasn't my place to fill. And I felt like, for a couple years, that's what it was like. And he actually ended up losing his job, like probably less than a year after he left. And then he like begged my mom to come back. And she thought she was doing the good thing and trying to make it work. And then he came back and like, I'm the boss of this, I'm the king of this castle. And like my mom and my sister and I were living there and like doing our own thing. Like I was in high school and he was mean to my sister and like we were all safe there together and he just came in and disrupted it. And then after I graduated and went to college, he left again and they sold the house. So it just felt like he came back to wait until he could sell the house, which created more anger, more resentment. So for years I just didn't want to have a relationship with him. And I tried many times and it didn't work out. And I really haven't talked to him in the last probably 15 years. And I finally said to my therapist after the last thing, and I was like, "Can I be done with this guy now?" And I finally had to like ask for permission not to have him in my life, which seems silly now, but I mean that was 15 years ago, and I felt like I just kept trying because people just kept saying, "He's your dad, he's your dad." But like every time I went, I got hurt, and I just didn't want to get hurt anymore. So like he would reach out like every 5 years and try to contact me, and I just didn't want to have anything to do with him. And I didn't really want to have anything to do with my family on that side either. It just felt like everybody just buried lies. And I'm a Libra and I wear my heart on my sleeve and I don't like lies. I don't I don't understand why people feel like they need to cover lies up. Like one time I went to a family Christmas party and I had pictures that I had of my son. I don't know, maybe he was like 3 or 4 and I just gotten some new pictures and I showed my dad and he was like, "Oh, these are cool. Can I show grandma?" And I was going to show everybody. Like, I was like, "Sure, yeah, fine." And then later on, I realized like he was taking people upstairs one by one to secretly and discreetly show pictures of my son, which I had planned to show everybody and be like, "Look, I got pictures." And that was just weird. And to me, that was just like, "Oh, this is like a secret," and I didn't want it to be a secret. And it was just weird, and that's just the way things went, and it made me feel icky, and I didn't want to be around. So just things like that built up over time, and I just didn't understand what the deal was, and I didn't want to keep getting hurt. So I just stopped hanging out with him. And like he was 6'8", so he would always try to be like intimidating. Like, when are you gonna see me again? When are you gonna hang out with me? And I was like, I don't know. Why? And like he's always just like, you know, strutting, like trying to flex. But I'm like, I grew up with you at 6'8". Like you don't really scare me. So it didn't work. Eventually I was just like, whatever, I don't know. When are you gonna stop being a jerk? So I had all this like anger and resentment, and I didn't want to see him. And he had a bad heart, and so he kept going in the hospital, and he had stents and angioplasties and recalibrating his rhythms. And eventually I just told my family, just call me when he dies because I don't care. Like I would go into the hospital occasionally and see him, and then it would just be like I'd get hurt again. And it's like some victim mentality on his part. Like he never apologized ever. You know, he always wanted to blame somebody else, which is interesting because, um, yeah, we'll get to that. So my sister messages me and says, Dad's in the hospital. I just want to give you an opportunity to like come and see him if you want. I know if you want to say something to him, or I know he wants to say something to you. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like I'd been processing for 20 years. I had worked through it in therapy for over 20 years. Like I really felt like, oh, no, thank you. And then I don't know, like I felt like it was kind of shitty that, like people wait till their deathbed to be like, hey, come and forgive me of my trespasses. And I don't know. I've still been dealing with that, like trying to figure out like, getting into this energy healing work and journeying. Like I wasn't sure because I wasn't sure if I needed to like go do that for him to release his karmic ties. And I was like, nope, you know what? I'm not gonna do that. Maybe that was egoic of me. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I decided, and Melissa was like, you could send him Reiki. So I sent him Reiki on his deathbed to his hospital, and I felt good because I decided like I'm gonna have um I'm gonna have a better relationship with him on the spirit side of things because I just can't deal with the ego part anymore. Like, I don't know. Like maybe he changed in the last 15 years. I don't know. Like I wasn't there. I don't know. But I'm gonna guess probably not. Sometimes people get stuck in webs of lies, and it's hard to undo that, and that becomes reality. And that reality is not the reality I lived in. So I guess I just was thinking, I'm gonna do the work, and I'm gonna meet him on the spirit side because that's what I do. I I I guess I'm coming out of the psychic closet, as they say. Uh, and I'll talk about this more in another one. This is just about my dad. So I've been working on my channeling meditation and communication with my guides for the last couple years, and it comes on pretty heavy when it's there and pretty clear, and I can hear it now, and I can also ignore it now, kind of, I guess. So I did the Reiki And then the next day I found out he passed away. And that was kind of weird because, like, now that I'm in this position of understanding the psychic world and the spirit world, I was like, I got this way when his mom died too. I was like, leave me alone. Like, I'm not, nope, don't come into my space. I felt very like, it kind of feels violating sometimes because you don't know if they're watching you. And, I'm just like, you don't deserve, I'm like, I'm still in my ego, right? Like, you don't deserve to see me now. and so, like, I just wanted to avoid it, I guess. I was avoiding it. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna wait. And then, like, I was seeing a healer and they're like, no, don't do anything for like 3 months. Leave that alone. Unless he comes to you. But don't go looking for that for like 3 months because he's got stuff to do. And I was like, cool, 3 months. I got 3 months, right? Well, then like some weird stuff started happening and like I started getting this pressure on my chest, like someone was stepping on me and I couldn't breathe very well. And I was having like I think it's vagus nerve. I don't know, but like in my own experience, it's like this fluttering, and it's my heart, and I'm just like pressure. It's like heartburn or indigestion, and it's all confusing because I'm like perimenopausal, so I got a lot of new things happening. Yeah, see this? I have like 50-year-old acne now. No, I tried to cover it up, but yeah, sorry. Deal with it. Yeah, so I had this fluttering on my chest and I was like, maybe I have heartburn. And it just kept going on and kept going on. And my wife, Melissa, was like, I'm feeling some weirdness. And I'm like, yeah, I know, right? And one day, like, she was feeling something and I was feeling something. And I was like, I think my dad's here. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, ugh. So we were both like, go away, go away. And I kept saying, like, I'm not ready for this right now. Like, I need more time. And I was avoiding my altar. I was avoiding meditation more than normal because, sometimes I just do that anyway. But this was like weird. It was like more than normal. And like we were clearing and doing J shielding all the time, like as much as we could. But like it just kept like, ugh, we were bogged down. And I I was driving home from work. So we're getting into the meat of it here. Um, So I'm ignoring my dad, right? And I'm driving home from work and I'm on the freeway and I remember, when those when lights hit your eyes and then you kind of close them and then you can still see things. Well, that kind of happened and I don't know what it was, but it was different and it was like it was floating. It was like a bent over outline of a body, right? Like hunched over and bent squatting down. And it was like this big, right? And it was just like floating. And I made eye contact with it. And then it just like floated over to the side. And I was like, is that just like a floater in my eye or something? But it was big. And then it was bright red. And it went over to the side of the road and it stopped there. And I like watched it as I drove by and it stayed there. And I was like, is that my dad? Like, is he pestering me? And I don't know, right? So, um, yeah. So I was thinking I had this client whose father died and they started, they had a horrible kind of tumultuous relationship with their father and they started communicating with him more after he died. Now they have an amazing relationship. So I guess that's where I got the confidence that I was like, oh, I'm just gonna have a better relationship with him in the spirit world. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not ready for this, right? And I don't know, for a lot of you who know me and you're listening to this, you're like, what's up? Like this is weird and crazy. And I'm like, I know, right? But it's happening. So boop, boop, here I am. Um So I kind of put that on my mind. I'm like, okay, whatever. He's like pestering me, and I'm not ready, so I'm still avoiding it. And then Melissa and I have Reiki circle at the office, and her and another person are working on me. And she's like, so there's like, I've been having trouble connecting, right? So she's like, there's something blocking you from your throat chakra up. And she could see it, and it was like a metal piece. I don't know how I got there. I've been cleared so many times. I've had other people clear me, and I don't know if it was like something that just came in or if it was something that was there and it was ready to be seen, but she saw it, and I kind of grabbed it out and she blew it away, and we're like, well, that was weird, right? But then I instantly felt like kind of a flush of like that connectedness, and I kept processing that over the next few days. I think it was just a couple days, I guess. And so like I'm still feeling kind of weird, but I feel better. I feel more open. I feel connected to my third eye finally. That's been like really stuck, and I felt freer through here, from the heart up. And I think that pressure went away. And so I had a doctor's appointment the other night, and it was a late night, and usually I see them in the morning, and they're kind of like a healer doctor. And so I went to see them, and I was mentioning like Melissa and I had just been feeling like really bogged down, and like, we're like Mercury's in retrograde, maybe that's it. Like it was just really intense though. And so I come in, and I start talking, and I don't remember what I was talking about. But then like my doctor starts asking me, because they do family constellation, like, okay, like, well, tell me about your relationship with your dad. And I was like, blah, 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 blah. And I was telling him the whole story about how he left. And then she was like, yeah, I think we need to deal with whatever this is before we do anything on the inside. And I was like, okay. I'm like, cool. So we like did a journey together, and I'm like sitting there like, okay, fine. At least I know that someone else is going to be here and I'll be okay. And so I'm really open to this kind of stuff. So I felt safe to do that. And I just have some notes here, so I'm trying to remember. So she starts out clearing the room, and I'm holding on to some crystals. Um, and she brings the ribbons down, clears the room, and it's just like heavy. And she's like, "Do you know what this is?" And I was like, she's like, "Can you see what it is?" I'm like, "Yeah, it feels like dark, heavy clouds." And she's like, "Yeah." So I've cleared the room, and like down here is is fine, but up here is like really heavy. And I'm like, "Yeah, it's like storm clouds up there." And she's like, "Yeah." So she's like, can you ask it what it might need from you? And so I'm like, huh. I'm like, is there something that you need from me? So I'm talking to the cloud now. And like I'll just explain this like how I see things, because it's different for everybody, obviously. But like you kind of just get pictures in your mind. And sometimes you get an understanding of of like a conversation that tele telepathic. So like the clairvoyance is seeing things, and that comes and goes for me. Like sometimes it's like super clear, and it's just like all these things are happening, and sometimes I like see a black sky and like nothing's there and I'm frustrated. So I see the clouds. It's just like an understanding. Like they're not in the room with me. They're just I can just see them in my imagination, right? And they're just random things that pop up. So it's like I can see them and she's talking to me about them and I'm like, yeah, I see that too. And so I said, "What is it that you need from me?" And then here's where it's weird, right? That little red like crouched down human figure floats in my brain, like out of nowhere. I didn't think of it. It was just popped into my brain. And I was like, oh. And then at the same time, I was like explaining to her what I had seen. And so she's like, well, can you ask that what it needs? And I was like, I laughed and I was like, hey, do you need a hug? Because I was just like, whatever, that's my go-to, right? Because like when I do my inner child work, I always say like, hey, I love you, you're safe now. Do you want a hug? And so I was like, you want a hug? And so like she laughed and I laughed, right? Because I was talking out loud so that she could stay along. And as if I was by myself, I wouldn't necessarily talk out loud. But since I was with her, I was talking out loud. Um, and so at the same moment I say, hey, do you need a hug? It turns green. And I realize it wasn't my dad. That red thing wasn't my dad. That red thing was my anger towards my dad. Yeah. So as soon as I like hugged it, it turned green. And I was like, whoa. And yeah, I got like a lot of heart chakra love. And it was pretty crazy. And then she asked me, she told me, oh, and I was like, I was telling her, I was like, I was still kind of mad at my dad. And I like she's like, what is your hesitation from like connecting with him? And I was like, I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to have to deal with like he shouldn't get to see what I'm doing in my life. And she's like, well, she had been reading a book and I don't know if she even told me what book it was, but it was like um the book was talking about how, you know, like we have these different parts of us. And so like the part of her or like the part of him after he died, it splits into like let's say ego and soul, right? And I was trying to avoid the ego part. And so that kept me from connecting to the soul part. And when she said that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And she's like, the ego part is for him to deal with, not you. And the soul part is what wants to be your guide and be with you. My team my team of guides that I have. Oh, and like one day I did sit for meditation before all of this happened, and he, you know, we go into your garden and all my guides were there. He was there, and I was like, no, 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 get out of here, get out of here. And they were like, okay, we won't let him in here. And so at this point, she's like, yeah, you can just have him on your team now. He just wants to be there and guide you. And I was like, oh my God. And so I'm still mad, right? I'm still kind of mad, but I'm feeling better. And I hadn't cried yet in the session, which, and maybe I'm getting this out of order, but she's like, what do you need from him? And I was like, sitting there, like, I don't know, you know? And she's like, do you need him to say, I'm sorry? And that's when, like, my eyes filled up, like, in the back of my eyes, they just started filling up with years. And I was like, yeah, I need him to say that. And he did. And then I'm like, I see him hugging me like a little kid. And he's like, I love you, sweet pea. I'm so sorry that I had to show up for you like this. And I love you and I'm so proud of you. And 30 years of anger just fucking evaporated. It just evaporated. And on top of that, I feel like we probably did some serious ancestral healing. And I hope that my son can feel that too, you know. And he's been back in my life for about 11, 12 years now. You know, he's 30. Um and he hasn't been talking to me for a while. And he's angry and I don't know why he's angry, and he said he doesn't know why he's angry, but he's angry, you know, cuz that's a video for another time, but I hope that maybe he could feel some of that, you know? Because I feel like we just did some major abandonment work. And I know that there's definitely some of that that we need to work on, you know, because by trying not to abandon my son, choosing adoption for him was just abandonment, even though I was trying to protect him. But I think working through abandonment, as hard as it is, as uh, a purpose of our human design, even, is is hard enough on its own, you know, without a lot of other trauma on top of that, a lot of other toxic interaction. And I felt like these people in my life were helping me, you know, with discovering this, right? The hardships that I've gone through in my life, the feeling like my dad leaving burst and broke my heart. And my mom just really couldn't show up in the same way that he did for me. Like he was my first unconditional love. And I don't think I got that from my mom, you know? I mean, she loved me her way and it just wasn't nurturing like he was, you know? And so when that left, it was really hard. And I had to tell my mom at some point, like, you need to tell me that you love me more often and you need to hug me more. But like, my dad gave the greatest hugs. And anybody that knows me loves my hugs. I give big old bear hugs, like I'm 6'8" too. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with you. And my dad and I joke around and it's great. It's great. I know that he's here all the time with me. And it's fabulous. And I think that we all, I guess, from being in this spiritual world so much now, that like I truly believe that we choose the stuff we want to come down here and work with. work through. We choose our families because they're going to help us work through that stuff. And it's all contract, right? We're down here experiencing human existence and we have a contract. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might have a contract with my son that he was going to go through abandonment through adoption. Like, I don't know. But I know now that like my dad's contract with me was abandonment also, right? And my mom's contract with me is probably like not being able to be as close as I needed her to be. And my dad leaving made me just need that love. And that's my journey, is like unconditionally loving myself so that I can be unconditional love to the world. And like I said, that's why this exists. This is the road that I'm on. And I guess I'm trying to tell a story with this podcast about my journey. And this is a situation where this is a current happening in my life. And I just really wanted to share it because it's monumental. And it's the second monumental experience I've had in 2 years. And I will tell you about the other one soon. And thank you for sharing this journey with me. And I hope it helps. I I just think it's so beautiful. We can do the work to see and face face that suffering. Face that suffering and work through it as hard and scary as it is. You know? Like, there is magic on the other side of that. You know what I mean? Like, crazy shit happens in the world and it makes people suffer. And the suffering is what grabs our attention. And we can either get lost in the suffering, 30 years of anger, and I was angry because my heart was broken, because my best friend left. 30 years of anger because someone broke my heart. And it was my dad. And I thought I worked through it. I really did. I really thought I was working through it. And I did a lot of work. And probably that work allowed me to get to the next stage, to do this healing with energy workers and healing my inner child and ancestral healing. In another video, I'll tell you when my grandma came through and for the first time. And yeah, Inez, that's a story. But don't give up. You are so loved. And your people, especially the ones on the other side, are so proud of you. And they're on your team and they're filling you with love. And they're there with you every step of the way. You'll find them in meditation. More and more people are able to connect in this way in meditation. All you gotta do is say, hey, what's up? You know, their messages come through in pictures or old stories. Like yesterday, I got this really cool memory. And I wasn't thinking about anything. I just remembered stilts. These
wooden stilts that my dad used to make me when I was little. He'd be in the garage, like building something, and I'd be outside playing, and he would make me a set of stilts. And my dad was 6'8", so like I could be on the stilts and be as tall as him. And I would just walk up and down the sidewalk on my stilts. You know, it was a 2x2 with a little triangle wedge on the side. And I would just walk around and like chase my friends. And I just thought I was so cool because I had these stilts. Because it was the 80s and I had imagination. And yeah, so that memory just popped through, and I'm just like, yeah, Dad, I remember that. So don't think you're weird when you're talking to your ancestors, the people that you've lost, okay? Because they're there. They're there in spirit, and they're encouraging you, and they helped you in some way along the way. Just remember that. You are loved. I love you. Your people love you. Go out and love yourself unconditionally. Find an energy healer. Start working on that. Take a Reiki class. Find that way to open yourself up and let that light in. Connecting to source and God and whatever you want to call it. Listen, find your team. They're always talking to you. Don't think you're crazy, because you're not. Okay. Thank you so much for listening and sharing my journey. And so much love to you. We ask our listening community to help us reinforce the energy shield of our intention, to reach out wider and brighter. Love energy is important to share. We ask you to bring light, love, and grace into the world. Please help us share this message, whether verbally or energetically.